Hey, how you doing? This is Craig back from StopDrinkingExpert.com. Quick video today. I wanted to share something that a friend of mine, Rupert, shared with me, and it is entitled, Great Britain has a drinking problem and the alcohol industry can't afford to let that stop. So let's talk about that in detail. It's a fantastic article in the Guardian newspaper. I just thought it'd be worth going through because, as you'll know, if you've watched this channel, this is not just about helping people quit drinking for me. This is about highlighting the narcissism and the downright pure evil of the alcohol industry. Because I believe that big alcohol today is like big tobacco was back in the 1960s and 70s, ruthlessly killing its customers and then denying it has anything to do with it. Absolutely shameless, disgraceful, and it needs to be outed. So the way you can help me get that message out there is by liking this video and sharing it as much as possible on your social media feed. If you are worried about your drinking, if you've just stumbled across this video, then do yourself a huge favor. Visit the website below, stopdrinkingexpert.com, and sign up for my next free quit drinking webinar. All right, let's get into it. So this is an article in The Guardian that I think is worth going through in full because it is fascinating and scary. And the headline is, Britain has a drinking problem and the alcohol industry can't afford to let us kick it. So it starts off by saying that Britain has a drinking problem, and it's an issue that this is not about COVID. It predates the COVID-19 pandemic. But evidence for this claim seems more stark than ever. Millions were drinking at harmful levels while stuck at home in lockdown, and alcohol-caused deaths, mostly from liver disease, soared to a 20-year high. Think about that. And think about the pandemic. And remember, the rolling news services were running that death counter. They were doing almost like a Casey Kasem style countdown on the number of deaths per country around the world. They loved it. The media loved it. It was easy journalism. But did you ever hear at any point in that them talking about the number of people alcohol killed in lockdown? I didn't see it at all. Not talked about. So there is no doubt the pandemic caused a big problem to get even bigger. Well, this article continues. It's not just about the drinking, but also about the closure of vital support services. That also contributed with higher rates of relapses, fewer referrals from doctors and hospitals, and a large number of long COVID patients are consuming problematic amounts of alcohol, one small study has suggested. The causes for such patterns seem equally clear. The extreme stress, boredom, trauma, and isolation of a protracted and dangerously mismanaged pandemic, in combination with Britain's deep-rooted drinking culture and the general human proclivity for the relaxing properties of alcohol. These demand-side factors are essential to understanding alcohol use here or anywhere else. Beer, wine, and spirits aren't unilaterally foisted onto the British public, but consumed with enthusiastic participation by drinkers. But what we're not talking about nearly enough is the influence of supply-side contributors on our national consumption, namely the incredibly powerful multinational companies that produce and sell alcohol for enormous profits, including brewers such as AB, InBev, and Heineken, distillers such as Diageo and Pernod Ricard, and both off-trade and on-trade retailers such as Tesco and Stonegate, respectively. Alcohol has an extremely long and complex history, but its ever-increasing ubiquity is largely the product of its commodification and deregulation by big alcohol. The industry and its army of trade associations and front groups incessantly jostle to increase consumption, market share, and profits, manipulating and influencing price taxation, licensing, density of retail, advertising, and sponsorship, international trade agreements, obfuscating scientific findings, tough word, and delaying public health efforts. Rather than being subjected to intense tobacco-style restrictions, the alcohol industry has so far successfully fought to maintain self-regulation and offload responsibility for alcohol-related harms onto individual problem users. This is the important bit, especially through the discourse of responsible drinking. And you know, if you've watched this channel for a while, this is a big rant point of mine. This defense that the alcohol industry has to any sort of questioning that their products are killing their customers. They always come back, always say the same thing. They've never said anything different. They always come back and they say, if you drink in moderation, there's no problem. We encourage our customers to drink in moderation. That, my friend, is bullshit. Because if we all listen to them, and somehow, magically, overnight, we were able to do the impossible. If all the problem drinkers of the world were suddenly able to do what is stayed away from their capability for so long, and to actually drink responsibly, it would destroy the alcohol industry. That's the truth. So while the alcohol industry stands up and says we encourage all our customers to drink responsibly, they do that knowing that if the people actually listened, it would devastate their business. That's how we know they're full of shit. So let's continue with this article. So, article-related harms are not restricted to those experiencing dependency. About 600,000 people in England alone, even relatively low doses of alcohol consumed on a regular basis, increase the risk including digestive and cardiovascular disease, traumatic injuries, and cancers of the esophagus, liver, and breast. A recent study estimated that almost 750,000 new cases in 2020 were attributable to alcohol use worldwide, including about 100,000 from moderate drinkers. 100,000 people who just had the odd glass here and there got cancer from alcohol. Previously heralded claims of alcohol, especially red wine, providing a protective function for issues such as heart disease and diabetes, are also in doubt. They're not in doubt. That has been long since disproved. There was an exhaustive piece of research that pretty much conclusively said it's nonsense. It's not in doubt. It's not debatable anymore. Anyway, I digress. The crisis of alcohol-related harms is principally caused by the fact that the profit-motivated alcohol industry structurally incentivizes higher risk drinking. Industry revenue, this is the important bit, listen to this. Industry revenues would drop by 38% or £13 billion a year if all the drinkers used the government guidelines to regulate the amount they drank. So if we all drank moderately, the UK drinks industry would lose £13 billion. Can you see why it's complete nonsense when they stand up and say, but if we, if you just drink responsibly, you'd be okay. They don't want us to drink responsibly. Companies have a vested interest in preventing such reductions, yet it is exactly this kind of structural change rather than voluntary and ineffective measures preferred by the industry required to seriously curb alcohol harms. What this refers to is that little sticker that you see on alcohol bottles that says drink responsibly. They put that there. They don't even bat an eyelid because they know full well that their primary profit generating customers can't do that anyway. Public health organizations, such as the World Health Organization, have long called for measures to reduce the power of the alcohol lobby through bans on advertising, limiting the density and hours of retail, and increasing taxes and minimum unit pricing. Other policies in this vein include mandatory nutritional information and warning labels, prohibiting industry involvement in policymaking, and coordinating global restrictions to limit predatory capital flight. The profit motive driving constant expansion of consumption should also be curbed through increased public ownership of production and retail. But restrictions alone will not be enough. We also desperately need to start a conversation around genuine alternatives to its use. For starters, there needs to be a massive expansion of free and public alcohol-specific healthcare for higher-risk drinkers that doesn't demand sobriety as a condition of use, including managed alcohol programs, therapy, medication-assisted treatment, and psychiatric care. This should also include public development of desirable alternatives such as synthetic alcohol, legislation and regulation of low-risk psychoactive drugs, the promotion of public spaces that aren't exclusively oriented around alcohol use. And this is, something else that I've said constantly, and why I've always had a bit of a beef with AA, and doctors' oversimplification of drinking problems. When you go to your doctor and you tell him you're worried about your drinking, he asks you how much you're drinking. You tell him and he says, yeah, you should cut down. You go, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. That's not the problem. I understand what I need to do. What I don't know is how. And the thing is, he doesn't know how either. And this AA thing where you go there and you're basically labeled, you're a dirty alcoholic. You always will be an alcoholic, and you can never, ever, ever have the thing that you want most on planet Earth again. And you've got to be a good boy or a good girl and refrain from drinking the thing that you want most on planet Earth. And so you do what you're told and you stop drinking. There's no alcohol in your system, but you're miserable. You are now what they affectionately call a dry drunk. You're sober but miserable, and that is not a solution. Look, whether we like it or not, when we're drinking alcohol, it gives us something. All right, it's very short term, and the price you pay for it is massive. But if you just take it and throw it away and say, right, you're not allowed that anymore, you're going to ache, you're going to yearn for the thing that you're being deprived of. You're going to feel like you've lost. You will grieve for alcohol because it's not been effectively replaced with something better. That's so important, and virtually nobody talks about it. If you're quitting drinking, you got to fill the void. For God's sake, don't end up sitting on the sofa watching Netflix on your own, bored and lonely, with a massive void inside you left behind by alcohol, because as sure as night follows day, that evil clown that lives in your head is going to say, you don't need to feel like this. There's a really simple solution. And he's got massive leverage on you in that moment. And so your defense against being in that situation is to make sure that you don't just remove the alcohol, you replace it with something better. The article concludes by saying, ultimately, this is about expanding opportunities for relaxation, socializing, and pleasure in ways that don't eventually kill, injure, or harm. It's undoubtedly an enormous undertaking given the dominance of big alcohol over global policy, discourse, and imaginations. Radical and systemic political action is urgently required if we are to stand any chance of addressing Britain's great drinking problem, or we will continue to mourn it. Great article in The Guardian, worth a read and worth sharing for sure. But look, unfortunately, I think alcohol is a lot more complicated than cigarettes, because, and fundamentally, it all comes down to this. Cigarettes don't alter your mental state. They don't affect your ability to think, to reason, to argue logically, whereas alcohol does. It changes who you are as a person. Cigarette smokers smoke and they might claim to feel a bit more relaxed, but they're still the same person that they were before they smoked. You could smoke 40 a day and be a brain surgeon and stop in the middle of the surgery and have a cigarette, and it wouldn't affect your ability to continue doing your job. But with alcohol, that's not true. It makes you stupid, changes your personality, changes your character. So the problem with that is governments of the world, who, let's be fair and honest, don't know their arse from their elbow, have this substance in legal circulation that dumbs down their audience, dumbs down the general public, makes them significantly more stupid. Now, think about that for a moment. If you are a corrupt politician that is trying to sneak legislation in that benefits you and your family, and you don't particularly want people to notice what's really going on. If you're a politician performing a piece of sleight of hand, you're standing up publicly saying that you're for the greater good, but actually what your real motive is to make as much money for you, your friends, and your family. Doesn't that just sound like every politician? But if you're that person, do you want a country full of really switched on, intelligent, astute people? Or do you want a country full of stupefied, zombified, drugged up idiots. Think Brexit. Of course, it's the latter. So there's no incentive for politicians to change this because it's in their interest to keep the subjects anesthetized. And then you add to that the amount of sway that the alcohol industry has in our government and in our politics. The amount of brown envelopes that are passing discreetly between politicians and big alcohol. And you've got a situation that is not going to change anytime soon. And so we have to take control of this situation for ourselves. Because if you want to wait for your politicians to do it for you, you'll still be waiting when you're 6 foot under the ground. It won't happen. There's no incentive. Excuse me. So we have to do this for ourselves. And we do it by talking about this, by sharing our opinions, by getting the word out there that we're not stupid. We know what's going on and we've had enough. Big alcohol kills its customer base and it knows that it does it. It's exactly the same as big tobacco was in the 1970s. Nothing's different. Apart from it's 2022. And here is an evil industry still getting away with it unchallenged. So that's it from me today. Please help share this message and get the word out there by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing it on as many platforms as you can. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. And it's the only drug on planet Earth that when you get a problem with it, they blame you and not the drug. That doesn't happen with any other substance. If you think about it, cigarettes. You tell someone you're addicted to cigarettes, they don't go, oh, you dirty smokeaholic. You're broken, weak-willed smokeaholic. You're going to be a smokeaholic for the rest of your life. They don't do that. They don't give you that label and say, well, that's it. You're broken forever now.
I really consider this because it's different. It's different to anything you can find out there, and it gives you real mental freedom from the clutches of alcohol.
I had an email about 6 months ago from a lady. She said, I was thinking about joining your course, but then I've just seen that red wine is good for your heart. How do you defend against that, Mr. Stop Drinking Expert?
It was in the reader's side.
Yeah, it must be true. I said, well, the defense against it is it's not true. And that's the biggest defense you can always have.